Mhm. All right, welcome back to another wonderful episode of Fill in the Blank podcast. I'm the host, Phil Austin. I have a very special guest with me today and an old, longtime friend of mine. His name is Glen Dakan. He is a former Naval Aviator commander out of the Navy. He currently resides in Kansas City, but he's down in Tampa, Florida right now, where he joins us live and direct. I know a lot about what he does, but at the same time, I have no clue what he's involved with, but he has quite an extensive background, which we will get into all kinds of stuff. But he has served 2 tours in Iraq, flying combat missions. And being that it is Memorial Day weekend, I thought it would be perfect timing to have him on as a veteran. So thank you very much, Glen, for your service. And welcome to Fill in the Blank podcast.
Hey man, glad to be here. It's been too long, Phil. I mean, we've talked here and there online, but this is awesome to reconnect after literally some decades, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. It has been too long. So tell me. Okay, so obviously, let's kick off with the military stuff since it is Memorial Day weekend. So you are a naval pilot, and you have served some interesting tours in Iraq doing combat missions and whatnot. And then you also are done some counter narcotics in South America, which I have to say I have seen firsthand, which was interesting. I'll get into that.
Absolutely.
You've also done some counterterrorism in the Middle East, leading campaigns there. So tell me, I know that tell me, just get it started, man. Tell me how you got involved with that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, Phil, you and I, our dads were pretty close. We were next door neighbors, growing up, and we kind of obviously parted ways out of Las Vegas when you turned 18 and I turned 18 when we went to school. But yeah, our dads got together. We grew up, with pretty tight families next door, and really the military thing started back when I was in high school. My dad is a Vietnam veteran. He enlisted in Vietnam back in I think it's 68, I think is the year, and has spent about 3 years, and most of that deployed over in Vietnam. And he got out, and he basically was telling me on the vision that, hey, it set him up for life, right? He always describes the vision of he was like rolling into college, not at 17 or 18, but at 21, so he could drink, and he had a brand new Shelby off the showroom floor, and he's like, hey, Glenn, like if you think about this well, and you think about getting into a 4-year college, and then getting yourself set up, you can always get out after 4 years and you're set up. You don't need debt, get on scholarship, you'll be an officer, kind of pick your poison, but you got to work hard in high school to get there. And Phil and I both know the high school we went to wasn't exactly churning out Ivy League candidates, left and right. So he was, that's really, he's been inspiration kind of, and he was kind of shocked that I continued on. I've been in 18 years. I'm about less than 2 years from my 20-year retirement. So he's a little bit shocked that I chose beyond the 4 years, but that was the initial spin. It's just sort of like, hey, this will get you where you need to go, and look at me as an example. So I always kind of thought about that, and obviously drank that Kool-Aid and did it, right?
Nice. Yeah, you got it. You got out of that right away at a high school. I think I recall that.
Yeah.
So you went right in as a Navy, as an officer, and you were beeline for as a pilot. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's the background is you got to kind of, to be an officer is like the first step, and then you either go to officer candidate school, which is kind of your compressed boot camp, or you do it over either a service academy like the Naval Academy, West Point, or you do it the way I did, which is ROTC, which was I would always highly recommend that to almost anybody, because I always say, hey, whether you end up in the Army holding a gun or behind a tank or on a submarine or flying a plane, like everybody ends up at the same place. You might as well have a good time doing it. And so I talked to my dad about that, and he was like, well, again, to get to officer candidate school, you have to get a 4-year degree, right? So it's like for folks that maybe have graduated college, and then they say, I really want to be a lawyer, or I want to serve in the military, what have you. So I did ROTC, and I was lucky enough, lucky and hard work, right? That's kind of two things you have to have, but I worked hard enough and lucky enough to get a 4-year scholarship at Navy ROTC at Vanderbilt, and
that's awesome.
And did ROTC for those 4 years. And then in that process, you're competing. Once you determine like the Navy, then it becomes, hey, do I give me a ship submarine, a marine, SEAL, or aviation. So obviously it's a competition spot. By the time you kind of earn, the SEALs and the pilots are pretty competitive. So you have to kind of like plan out your path during that four-year ROTC gig or Naval Academy gig. But anyway, that's just kind of a primer for those listening. Like, how do you get to be an officer in the military? It's a pretty distinct path and a couple different options.
So got a delay on the sound there. So did you end up going like through Top Gun or anything like that, or is that? No,
I wish. I didn't really. Let's put it this way: Top Gun is in whatever community you get into. There's the jet community is kind of what the movies are known for, but so I flew the big prop planes, which is now replaced by a 737. So like that like level of plane, and they do have the Top Gun, which is called like a level 5. So I got all the level 4s, and then the level 5. I wasn't long for active duty, and you kind of have to look at your career path. But I would have had an opportunity to do it, but no, I didn't pursue it. I got several buddies that have been Blue Angels in the Navy. I got several buddies that have gone through Top Gun test pilot school, and I even got one that's still. He was always kind of the best of the best. I'm going to be seeing him next month. But anyway, he's one of my flight school buddies, and he's on his like second, I think, or third look at naval astronauts. So it's pretty interesting to see some of the caliber of folks going through that. And he's like, hey, I almost made it, but they said go and get a PhD and in molecular biology. So that's what he's doing right now, is just going to round himself out with a PhD. Like, that's the type of the people. But yeah, the Top Gun thing is awesome because it's very once you're in naval aviation, you just kind of realize it's either timing or just kind of a path that certain folks take. But it's not nearly as like, hey, there's only like the Top Gun graduates and everybody else. It's you're like, oh, okay, you went Top Gun. That's pretty cool. But we all do very similar things, depending on where you go.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have flown some combat missions.
Yep.
And now, so what were you flying? Were you flying? You said like the 737 style. Was it like C-130s or? Yeah,
similar to the C-130. These planes are all now retired, and that's Phil. That's how you and I know we're getting old, man. It's like, hey, man, the squadron I flew in out of Maine is now decommissioned, not decommissioned, but they moved it. That base is closed. The plane I flew in Iraq is now decommissioned. They fly a new jet. But yeah, I flew the P-3 Orion. I flew about 4 different types of that bird, and you can think about it like a C-130, except a little thinner, sleeker, same engines and faster and multi-mission, right? So it was built kind of in the post World War II, Cold War era. As an anti-submarine mission, and we trained a lot on that. And then as Iraq and Afghanistan fired up, they realized they could do a lot of things with the bird. So I ended up flying, like I said, 4 different variants. Some are classified, and some are non-classified or unclassified. So
now, if I know my airplanes correctly, so that's the little C-130s. When you're flying those for combat purposes, you're flying at extremely high altitudes. Is that correct?
Yeah. We'll be top cover. Yeah.
You're top cover, and then when we see those videos of I'm sure we've seen them with like there's insurgents or whatnot, targets in the field, and you hear the gun firing, and then like a couple second delays, and there's just things exploding all around them.
Yeah. So that would be that's the Air Force gunships, and those are C-130 gunships. The P-3, the unclassified versions, basically look through a lot of. So what I can talk about, so again, similar to what you're getting at, but what I can talk about is a lot of Iraq, are sort of like unclassified missions. What the unclassified birds would be top cover. So we'd be looking at sniper emplacements and IEDs, and we'd put people on board with us. There's about a crew of 11 or 13, depending on the variant, and we'd put people on board with us. So like we'd be hanging out with, hey, we'd put a Navy SEAL on board because we're, top cover for those guys, or we'd put a British Army unit on board because we'd be streaming video of Eye in the Sky down to them and just kind of real-time communication. So it was a gambit, right? Everything from carrying some weapons to not carrying weapons, just depending on what the mission was, and in Iraq, right?
That's so cool. That's very cool. Cool stuff, anyway, in my eyes. I mean, that's I mean, and again, we thank you for your service, man. It's crazy. Absolutely. So you have done some of the, I'm guessing, so that also you've done some of the counter narcotics stuff in South America. I actually saw when so back in 2004, I believe 2004, 2005, I was in Costa Rica at the time,
Oh
just
yeah,
kind of,
that's right.
and I actually took my parents down there with me for a couple of weeks, and we were sitting down there on the beach, and I think we were on the Pacific side,
Yep.
and all of a sudden we saw like a C-130 aircraft like flying somewhat low, and I'm looking at it and I'm like, that's not Costa Rican, number one. And
Yeah.
there was a local Tico that I was talking with, and I was like, hey, is that normal? Do you guys see that? And he's like, bro, we don't have those type of airplanes here. And sure enough, there was a like probably about 10 miles offshore, you could see that there was a speedboat that was just hauling, that they were circling. And then we saw some Army Jeeps going by up on the road. They were chasing them going southbound. So it was like, it was live narco action in effect. So I'm sure
it looked like a C-130 to you, but that's I'm about 99% sure that'd be a P3 like I flew.
Okay. It wasn't as big as a C-130, so that's probably what you're doing.
Or if it did have, do you remember? You might not remember. It's been a long time. 2 engines or 4 engines, because there's some different variants.
I believe it was a 2.
Okay, so cool. So yeah, that's probably like a Coast Guard, U.S. Coast Guard, similar. It's like a CASA is what we call those. But yeah, P3s. We put Navy E2s down there, like reservists that are normally they'd be hanging out like on an aircraft carrier. We put them down there because they have some pretty powerful radar, and we'd find those blips in the water. And so yeah, interesting stuff. I can go into excruciating detail. Probably nobody wants to hear about it, but it's some really cool what we call interagency work, meaning like, you have Navy, we would be like the low boy, and we'd be at like 1,000 feet. You'd have the high boy as a Navy E2. And the E2, again, like just for general perspective, the E2 on the aircraft carrier launches, and they get up high and provide the radar picture for the carrier, right? So we put them over like the giant part of the swaths of Pacific, and then we'd be low boy, and they would just kind of vector us in. And then below us, we'd have the Coast Guard would roll in with like a cutter, and they would launch a helicopter and just be like shooting out the engines of these go fast. I mean, it was pretty ridiculous. I was like, that was my very first deployment. And I was like, wow, like we're doing it. It was like a totally like, hey, we got FBI, we got Coast Guard, we got Navy, we got, obviously some partners as well, right? So I was out of El Salvador and I was out of Ecuador doing that stuff. But yeah, Costa Rica, absolutely right, nestled up in there. But yeah, it's a real thing. It's constant. They call these joint interagency task force that sort of control, or what's called a JIATF. And the JIATF is it's constant, man, because the drug trade is it's got strong demand in the States, and it's highly lucrative. And these people, they got into submarines. I mean, it's pretty insane what they'll do to get these get the product moved.
And now that I recollect, it was a Coast Guard unit that was the low boy flying, and that was what was kind of I was kind of questioning. I was like, yo, we're in Costa Rica, like that Coast Guard is supposed to defend the U.S. coast. So for them to be, that far down south was kind of like, I was like, wait a second here, what do we got going on? And then with all the other action that was happening, I was like, okay, now I see what we're doing here.
The Coast Guard is interesting, man. I've seen the Coast Guard deployed as far as Asia, the Middle East. They deployed in the Arctic. I mean, they really are all over the place. They're defending U.S. interests, and kind of like freedom of navigation, it would be the best way to put it. And then same thing, if we're going to go like, all right, Coast Guard, you're based in Miami or whatever, like, hey, you're going to station down in Ecuador because, again, a lot of this drug trade impacts our borders, right? Our coast.
Yeah, it sure does. We see a lot of we go down to Key West, Florida a lot, obviously, and they're always doing the Coast Guard and the Navy SEALs we'll see the choppers go out, and then they'll just drop their people, and then they're always running training stuff out there, and then I think the Blue Angels have one of their bases, or maybe their home, that's down there right in Key West as well. So we're always seeing them practice as well. It's pretty cool. So
there's Naval Air Station Key West. Like I've gone through there, and a lot of the F-18s, they'll do what's called DETs. They'll do detachments down there, and then the Blues will come down because it's easy. They're based in Pensacola, and I was an instructor pilot in Pensacola. So, we'd see a lot of them, but yeah, I mean, it's easy to jump down when you're in a jet moving 600 miles an hour. It's easy to jump down from, you go across the Gulf and you do touch and goes and all that. Again, in the naval aviation world, we try to just, kind of point to point between bases. That's easier than kind of, we don't do touch and goes at O'Hare, so it's easy.
So I have to ask, and if you can't answer any questions, but obviously the audience is going to want to know, seeing how you have done some more elaborate missions, if you will. If there's any unclassified ones, I'm definitely interested. I'm sure that people are listening would be interested on some sort of maybe interesting missions that you have flown, whether it be in the Middle East, Iraq, even in the narco stuff. If you could share maybe a story or so about that.
Yeah, so I'll share probably two. One, the narco stuff. So again, I'm like a brand new pilot. It's ending 2005, going to 2006, my first deployment. So I get out of what's called SEER school, where they beat you up and you're like hungry and you're like going through survival mode and evasion mode and resistance in like a POW camp. So like you're like, wow, that was a crazy experience, and that prepares you if you ever get shot down. So like all the special forces and pilots, we go through this 2-week course. So I'm like, wow, that was crazy. All right, let me get some food. I haven't eaten in a week, and like that to check right on deployment. And it's like interesting because in naval aviation, and this is just a quick sidebar, you have helicopters that fly off of ships and aircraft carriers. You have P3s like mine that are too big to land on the carrier, but support the Navy sort of battle force. And you have F-18s and E-2s that fly off the carrier and do their strike mission or radar. So like P3s are kind of known as the pretty chill. Like you're like, hey, if you want to be an airline pilot one day and you want to get big heavy time in a plane, and you want to kind of hang out and in Costa Rica or El Salvador and do, you're not going to get shot at. Don't worry about it. And so I'm like, oh, that's awesome. So when you select in primary flight school, you're like, they look at your grade and they say, hey, you got to have a certain number to get above to get F-18s. So I had that. I was like the number 2 guy out of say like 17. So I was like sitting pretty, but my second slot, so I put jets first, and I put P3 second, and I got my second slot. I was like, that's fine. I'm the second guy, and first guy didn't get jets either. So it was like, okay, we have 2 P3 guys, and we go do our thing. And so I get on deployment in South America, and I'm like, this is pretty cool. And like we're hanging out at a hotel, and like I'm like, this is exactly what I wanted to do. This is great. Like I'm not stuck on a ship. I'm in a hotel. We're doing counter narcotics stuff. It's an easy environment to learn how to fly the big bird and all this stuff. And so one of our earlier missions, I just get thrown as a junior pilot. I get thrown on one of these missions with another crew because they're like, oh, you're new, rotate around. I don't have my own crew yet or anything like that. And it's a very casual day. We're just flying around, and all of a sudden, we had one of these E2s I mentioned earlier. He goes, hey, I got a radar hit, and we go over, and sure enough, there's like 2 go fast, and these are just these speedboats that are just literally nothing but fuel tanks and coke, right? And like we're on top of them, and they know the gig is up, and so we have video, and we're streaming down video, and we're recording it. So we're watching them, and they go to they idle the boats, and they're just dumping coke, just dumping it, and like so you're talking like bales and bales and bales of coke, like just thousands of pounds worth of coke out of these 2 go fast. And the Coast Guard, we vector them in, and then the Coast Guard helicopter, what's called a Hitron, so a very small helicopter, but loaded with like a door gunner. He rolls up, and these guys like they dump the coke, and we throw down a marker so we know where it is, because it's going to now just float in the ocean. And these speedboats just take off, and the helicopter like puts some warning shots out, and they don't stop. And so they just they get engaged and cleared by that Jayadif I mentioned earlier to like engage and take out these engines, right? So that was pretty cool. I ended up on Fox News. I got a truck coming. I got to mute.
It's okay. We can edit it out.
I got a big old truck right up the climax of the story. So it ends up Fox News like picks up the story, and they put somebody down. And again, I'm not taking the glory. I was a brand new pilot, but they interviewed the mission commander, like, what's going through your head, and how's this all work down here? So it was pretty interesting. I was like, holy crap, like I'm like brand new to what we call the fleet in the Navy, and here we are, like and out of that mission, still on my ribbons, I still have a Coast Guard Special Operations ribbon that they awarded for that, because again, it got pressed. It was like, and then it went to court, and the mission commander, the FBI was like, hey, why don't you come up to Miami here and testify against this drug lord? And my mission commander was like, I'd rather not be kind of on the list of the drug lords who know my face, and I'd rather, because they're like, we'd really love you to testify, but we can't make you. And the Navy lieutenant's like, no, thank you. So that's one. In kind of the earlier days of my flying, the combat missions, again, some of the things that we did can't really get into, but the things we can get into, the unclassified, we're still what we call combat support missions, direct combat support. And so we would be high boy, sort of tens of thousands of feet up, but we have frag is what we call it, and we control some of those gunships and some of those special forces on the ground. So we did some interesting operations in 2000. And I did my first tour in 2007, came back, did second tour 2007, 2008. So in those times, everybody's kind of that's studied the Iraq War and the lead up and all that kind of stuff. The Triangle of Death and the Sunni Triangle in Fallujah at that time. When I first got there, 2006 was, it was just hot, and you had Blackwater going in there, and you had, the Marines had to come in and retake Fallujah. That was all 2006. So that area was pretty, I wouldn't say chill, but it was much more, controlled. And Baghdad itself was kind of on a fight. There was a guy named Muqtada al-Sadr, MAS, and he was kind of sieging different areas, in Baghdad, and trying to retake the capital and trying to restructure. So one mission in particular that always sticks with me is just pretty badass, honestly, for the amount of like firepower we could bring to bear. So again, we were kind of high boy, and we had built this kind of what we call column of death or combat stack. So we had fighters on standby. We had gunships down low as far as helicopters, and we had a high gunship in one of those AC-130s. And there was a battle involving, and you can look all this stuff up, right? 2008, early 2008 timeframe, like the battle for Sadr City, SADR. So you had Muqtada al-Sadr that was kind of retaking his hometown, if you will, and it was a pretty pitched epic battle. But I was really fortunate to be a part of that because we were streaming down on the ground, we were relaying a lot of communications, and we were controlling by virtue of me and my crew. At that time, I was a plane commander, so I also was the one responsible for the plane and the mission and so on and so forth. But yeah, pretty interesting to be actually, kind of a direct part of some of the major combat operations. And again, when I joined this P3 community, I was like, oh yeah, it's gonna be great, chill, and so they've been restructuring these P3s and throwing on all this gear and throwing on these types of missions. And I was like, I thought I was supposed to hunt submarines and hang out and hunt drug runners and have a beer back in El Salvador when I'm done. And here I am, like in the pitched battle. And we were the first P3 squadron deployed to Iraq in major combat operations. So my squadron was VP-26 and VP-47 out of Hawaii. So we were the first two ever. And General Petraeus was the ground commander. He was like, hey, I need more P3s. And so we're like, oh my God, like somebody remembered that we exist and capabilities. So it's pretty interesting. So I actually have more combat time and missions and air medals and so forth than some of my F-18 buddies that, so it's kind of the way it ended up, kind of interesting.
That's awesome. You actually got to kind of not only be a part of it, but probably watch it live as it happened, which is crazy in itself. Which amazing. That's awesome. That's so cool. So let's segue a minute. And so, okay. So again, like I said, I have no idea what I know kind of, you're definitely an entrepreneur. You've taken on some interesting, roles now as in civilian life. You're with a group of entrepreneurs called the Pipeline Network. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, throw me some content with that.
Yeah, sure, man. So I did 10 years of active duty. I was a pilot, like we've talked about, and then I became an instructor pilot. So I got to fly the big planes and the missions, and I got to fly the small trainer jets. Throw on the helmet again and throw on the into an ejection seat and kind of do that. I got a brand new jet that I got to train on, and I was kind of chief pilot on. So tons of fun as an instructor pilot, training the next generation of aviators. And so did all that in 2013, got out of active duty, moved to Kansas City, Missouri, because my wife's from there. And we decided, the Vegas where I grew up in KC, we picked that. And I got into entrepreneurship. So that was my thing. I said, hey, I got some money in the bank I've been saving up, and I really want to, I went to business school, got a couple of degrees and so forth, and kind of felt prepared to do that. And started to get into automotive. Then I got into technology, and I can deep dive wherever you want to go with that. But I stayed in the reserves, and I kind of, 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks a year type of thing. so I can stay in the career progression, because I had 10 years in. And if you do 20, you can get a pension. And, and also I like to serve, and that's certainly a great part-time job. But full-time job in those years, 2013 to 2016, full-time gig, and grew my business, had 3 of them operating at one point. We sold cars offline, sold cars online, and then, I eventually kind of built a dealership kind of as well. So everything's going great until the reserves bit me and they deployed me again for a year. So that was not so great or fun or anything else, running some businesses that were finally, kind of catching steam. But yeah, back to original question, I'll deep dive anything else you want to get into there. But the pipeline entrepreneurs, I came back from deployment 2017, definitely very rocky financial situation. I should have really shut the businesses down if I was going to be gone a year. Just not happy about it. I was like, all right, I'm going to build it. I got out of actually direct selling cars, and I built a software company. And with that, I attracted and I applied for this pipeline entrepreneurs group. So pipeline's pretty cool, and it's basically a group of what they call high performing entrepreneurs building big business within Missouri, where I lived, Kansas, to include like Wichita, and Nebraska, to include like Omaha and Lincoln, right? So you have to apply. It's a big interview process. Then you go through a 1-year fellowship. That's almost like an entrepreneur finishing school. So whether you have like an MBA or you don't, and then from there, once you graduate out of your fellowship, then you you can choose to remain a paid member. And then you have a group of people very similar to what you're doing. You're building a business, you're running a team, you're trying to raise money, you're doing all these different things. And so it's a great network of folks that are very in tune with what you're going through, because it's a very tough job, obviously. And so, that's pipeline in a nutshell. So I'm still a member today. Even though I'm on active duty right now in Tampa, kind of bounce back and forth on active duty. But same thing, I haven't really stopped being an entrepreneur, and having mentors around you in pipeline specifically is fantastic. Right?
So if I understand you correctly, you are taking businesses. So these aren't technically your businesses as entrepreneur. Now you've had your own businesses, but with this pipeline,
I still do. Yep.
Yeah, but with this pipeline group, you're essentially taking business people or business owners, or people that like a group that wants to kind of start and establish a business in the region where you are. And you guys are kind of a team that kind of comes in and helps them kind of identify all the areas where they can really like flourish. Correct? Is that?
Yeah. So I think you're almost there. The pipeline fellowship does that. So they'll bring in. So for instance, I'm an entrepreneur, right? I get grouped into, and I apply, and all of a sudden, boom, I get the fellowship from pipeline, and then they bring in like MIT professors and venture capitalists from the Bay Area, and they teach you, all right, your business is here and you want to go here. How do you get from here to there? How do you grow normally a lot of times it's a venture capital backed type of high growth technology company or hardware company, anything that's innovative, you're building something new. That's pipeline as the fellowship. Then once you graduate, you have a whole network of folks that are doing the identical thing, right? So in business, if you kind of look at it generally, it's like, well, if you're going to own a business, right? You're either going to own a small business, which is like, think about it, your local plumber. You're going to franchise, you're going to be a Papa John's owner, or you're going to try to build like a new innovative high growth company, right? That's really kind of it. Like I said, you're kind of, or I guess, there's also your traditional business ownership is like, hey, I own a factory, right? I'm not trying to grow to a conglomerate of 100 factories in 10 years. So, I think there's probably 4 verticals to be fair to a lot of different business owners out there. So I think there's kind of your mom and pop franchise, your traditional business, and then your high growth, innovative business, which is kind of where I keep trending in that direction, which is, it's very hard and it's very risky, and it's very rewarding if you get it done. But again, it's not a well-worn path, right? So these pipeline entrepreneurs are all those type of business owners that are, bringing new software, hardware, innovation, and biotech. That's the cool part about it. It's not limited by a vertical. It's just a whole bunch of different folks that are like, hey, I'm a PhD in biotech and I have a cancer treatment. Hey, I have a subscription box service. Hey, I have a software as a service enterprise software solution business. Hey, I have a marketing tool that I'm using to grow. I have AI. Whatever it is, it's pretty interesting. And especially in the Midwest, you run into some folks that are into agriculture. Like, hey, I have a way that I'm using data and hardware to improve crop yields, 10x, and I hope to sell it to Monsanto one day. Like those are, so it's really cool because it's not limited by, a lot of these things, these high growth, venture capital worlds or whatever. They're very just like software, like, hey, if you're not software, get out of here type of thing.
Mm. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm following you now. I appreciate the more dumbing it down for me. I appreciate that.
That's just general terms. Yeah. Like, so it's a very special, there's nothing else like it in the country. Like that's kind of the fun part about it. So it is very unique, and everybody that comes in from the West Coast, East Coast, like, holy crap, you guys in the Midwest, like you've nailed it. Like, these people are raising, I know guys personally now on a pipeline, I can count almost on two hands that have had 8, 9, and even 10-figure exits, meaning they've sold a company for somewhere in the millions, hundreds of millions, and I think a couple of them have kind of combined, and it's unknown to me even, but I suspect they sold a company in the billion, right? So it's pretty interesting, very high performing group.
Wow. So what is the software company that you created? Is that what you're leading with the agriculture, or was that just?
Oh, no. Mine was in, so if I exited active duty in 2013, I've always been, and Phil knows this, when I was a kid, living next door, I think, yeah, I was gonna say you're 1 or 2 years ahead of me, but I kind of, I got a classic Mustang, and my dad had a classic Shelby, and always been a car guy, right? So I built that car as a kid, and, redid the little engine, and, underneath it, and painted it, and interior, everything you can imagine. Still have that car, my 67 Mustang, which is awesome. Needs some work, but anyway, so I built that. So I'm like a lifelong car guy. Okay, so I'm a pilot. I like boats, and I like planes. I like cars. So I'm like, hey, what industry is terrible as far as the consumers looking at it? Well, it's like the car buying industry. Like it's a miserable process. Dealers control it. What if I set out to kind of build a dealer of the future? And that was my goal, and that's what I did for from 2013. Started writing the business plan in 2012. Got out active duty. Started in 2013, very lean, my own, and grew it with my own capital and all that until 2016 when I got deployed. Right, so there's that big pause, and that was then I did a lot of soul searching while in deployment. Should have shut those companies down. They didn't run themselves well while I was gone. Kind of failure there, where they were growing before they sort of like went into decline, and all sorts of issues there I can get into. Don't leave your roost unattended. The easiest simple advice I can give to anybody when you're growing a business. So I did that, made a big mistake, came home, and I transitioned from selling cars online as a dealer to building a software company to enable dealers to sell online, right? And so I kind of was looking at that e-commerce thing. Carvana, which is now a very big company, I was tracking them early on, and I kind of seeing, and they were trying to be both their own dealer and sell cars online like Amazon. And I thought, well, geez, man, like, what if we created software from our experience in selling millions of dollars of cars online, but kind of doing it via the phone and fax and, kind of manually? What if we automated that process and sold that technology to dealers, which is called enterprise software. And this particular niche of enterprise software is software as a service, right? So, and this is so like a big software as a service company, a lot of people in business have heard of is like Salesforce, right? It's like, hey, I want to track my customers. Salesforce is such a big company, they like build skyscrapers and San Francisco. So like enterprise software as a service companies can be very, very big. Sort of like any software tool you would sell to another company. So that's what we decided to do. We set out and did it, and we launched it in 2018. And the unfortunate reality there is anytime that you're building something new and innovative, and you have investors, I raised about $2 million total in venture capital between equity and debt. Anytime you're building something that has this value and you start running out of money, you can kind of be a target for people that have money to kind of steal your idea, try to buy your company out. And unfortunately, I had some really bad folks on my board and that were investors. I didn't know it, but they kind of had a long-term plan to squeeze me as a guy that doesn't have $1 billion out of the software we were building, and they waited until they saw it actually work. So we launched the product, we got customers that were in the dealer space. And they saw us, turn on this company that had just been burning money before, and we got our first revenue. We signed only 2 customers, and it was like $30,000 of revenue in a month. And like, okay, and that's when they decided to kind of execute their hostile takeover plan. And I basically had to shut that company down to not let it just be stolen from me. So an unfortunate end to that company. It was going places, and that's, like I said, pipeline and raising the money. And so I was out money, investors were out money, but again, that's how sort of the risk and return of these high growth, high risk startups. And this one, like I said, was going. It was actually a real company. It was great, great team, and we kind of made it through a lot of hard times. And the unfortunate investors I chose, were a dealer group down in Texas, and they said, and here's kind of how it ended. So there's not just vague about it. They said, hey, now that we know the software works, we're going to place you, instead of giving you that $3.5 million check that we had all agreed to and all of our paperwork to keep growing this company, we're going to put you as a CEO of this minor, conglomerate that we own down, and you have to move, you and your family are going to move to Dallas, and we'll pay you a paycheck, and you'll get some stock options in this new company. And I was like, that's totally, I know what you're trying to do. You're trying to steal my software, and you know that I'm been out of cash because we fed it all into the business, and I'm waiting on your next infusion of cash, but you're trying to steal it, and you're trying to bully me, and I'm just going to shut the company down and go do something different. And that's exactly what I did. They didn't see that one coming because they're used to kind of bullying people with a paycheck. But anyway, that's like I said, the unfortunate, and that's kind of like, obviously a lot of ups and downs in these types of things, and that was the unfortunate down.
That's that's a straight gangster move, by the way.
Yeah.
And that's I definitely could say you learned that on the streets of La Fonda.
Set it on fire.
That's
just
it,
like
man.
Tupac taught us.
That's right, bro. You ain't taking that at all.
No, for sure.
So that obviously had to be somewhat of I don't want to say a rock bottom moment, but definitely a kick in the teeth,
for sure,
for you through business and in life, and it probably affected many areas.
Absolutely.
What was one of the major takeaways just in life, like a life meaning from that, like I don't want to call it a failure, because definitely was not a failure for you on your part.
Yeah, it's a circumstance. I mean, that's what it is, right?
Yeah. So what would be what moving forward from that, like what did you take away from that you've now applied to every area of your life?
Yeah. So I mean, that's great, and that's kind of I look at these, say, failures, setbacks, what do you want to call them, and say, hey, there's a learning moment, teaching moment, all those things that you kind of read about, and then you live something like that, where you're like, things were trying to get stolen from you, and you're like, I'll just set it on fire because you don't know me, type of thing. Like I said, that La Fonda gangster mentality. Number one is just absolutely like, I think the thing I did right was to not be bullied with people with money. And there's so much opportunity in America. I've obviously now pursued different paths, and I've realized there are other things to do. But the thing that really kind of sticks with me on that one is choose your business partners and investors extremely carefully, right? And that's kind of the biggest business adjustment and even life adjustment. I cut out. There's one bad dude in particular, and I have as a dude who's served in Iraq and served 18 years, I have a weakness that I've identified in my vetting of fellow veterans, right? So this guy came in my life. He came vetted from another guy that's a veteran that was working for me, and it turns out this guy at the end of the day is a psychopath and a compulsive liar, and he was the one that helped bring the initial investors in. And then when I got the dealer group to kind of like look at the next deal, he was basically running huge political games and basically disenfranchising me, even though he's claiming to be my friend. And so he weaseled his way into my life, weaseled his way into my company, and ended up setting up this structure of this horrible deal for me that would have also enriched him and gotten him ownership of my company. So long story short, I think I don't know if the dealer group would have been as vindictive and made such a sort of one way, take it or leave it situation to me. But I do know for a fact that cutting that type of guy, that guy in particular, but also that type of guy out of my life and forever. And also taking the lesson to saying, man, like I had a board, I had my own money tied up, and I had family money tied up, and I had investor people that I knew and trusted. And I had, I had a lot of employees. I had my wife working in the business. Like we made a lot of changes, right? Wholesale changes, just said. And, this is relatively personal, but I think, I share this with friends, and I don't mind, getting out there, because I think it's a big lesson to learn is, me and my wife were not compatible for entrepreneurship. So we ended up making a business divorce to prevent a real divorce, right? And we kind of like looked at that as the big picture and said, we can't do this anymore, right? She was brought in the company when I got deployed. She's not an entrepreneur by trade. She really kind of is very risk intolerant. So you got to kind of look at your risk tolerance. You got to look at how far you're willing to go to pursue the dream. Because, there's a lot of verbiage out there from like Gary Vaynerchuk and all these people are like, if you quit, you die and you might as well kill yourself. Like, some of this stuff is totally ridiculous, where it's just like, you need to have a realistic outcome, and you need to give it your all and not quit when it's hard. But there's also things you should destroy your life over building a company or some vision or whatever, because there's much more important things, right? So that's the lessons I've learned to now control in the business I run now. I only, do business and have business and am in business with people that I really know and trust, that have opposite skill sets or similar skill sets to mine, just whatever that looks like. But I don't have a board, I don't have employees, I don't have investors. Maybe I will again one day, but that's just what I let me cut that shit out. I mean, it basically is the bottom line.
It's a very interesting take. I had my own business out here, obviously small mom and pop type business that I was running out here. Actually, a couple different ones, but one I really kind of jump started myself, and did it for a couple of years. And one of the takeaways was how it was affecting my family life.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I had learned, and my father-in-law, who's very successful, he's the one that has a house down in Key West and whatnot. Okay. There was one night that he talked to me about some of the regrets that he had, and one of them was sacrificing his family. Now he's, obviously grown past that and been able to, reconcile that. But he says there's a lot of time that I missed early on that I wish I could have back. And that really stuck. Yeah. And that, I mean, he's, done very well for himself now, and he's still continuing to do well for himself. So, but that, that aspect was something that when I was in my business and I was, burning the candle at both ends and my kids were very young at that age, we're talking 3, 4, 5 years of age. When, those moments are very precious. One of the things that like I said, that really stuck with me. And I told myself, I don't care what money is involved or what opportunities are involved. That's something that I don't want to look back on and say,
very smart. And it's wise, especially while you're in it. It's so hard when you get in it. It's so hard to look, try to step out of it and look at yourself, unless you see other examples, right? I've seen these other examples that people have mentioned. Absolutely. It's extremely hard. And you have people outside looking in and saying, hey dude, hey Phil, hey Glenn, like, what are you doing this for? You're killing yourself. Like, is it worth it? What's your motivation? Well, I feel like I have to see it through the end, or I can't quit, or because Gary Vaynerchuk told me not to quit, or whatever it is. It's like, sometimes, I've quit some businesses and that's a sign of maturity in life, but also in business. It's hard to say, that business model didn't pencil. I've done that now several times since, and just explore some stuff. Maybe it could be lucrative, but nope. And somebody even said at one business, this is interesting to kind of look at, where you're like, hey, I'm gonna not do it. Somebody's like, hey, I would be in for about 2 million. I'm like, well, it's going to take 10 million to get this thing off the ground, and I refuse to start a business without undercapitalized again. I'm just not going to do it. So it's a huge opportunity. Guess what the time frame was, and guess what the area was? It was 2019, and it was in lab diagnostics pre-COVID, and we could have had a roboticized lab that could crank out more tests than anybody on the planet, right? That was the business model that we were looking at. It is in 2019, August of 2019. We're like, hey, we could do this. We can make it happen. I got a team and I had an investor, and we're like, we didn't do it. And 2020 hit, when like the worldwide demand for lab testing is now the highest it's been and will be in our lifetimes. And we could have had robots, on automating these processes that take hours to complete. We could have done it in minutes, right? So just kind of interesting. You're like, well, so who cares? Again, at the end of the day, I wasn't going to put myself through it. Nor could I afford to at the time, but it's just kind of interesting to say, we think it's going to take 10 million. These robots are brand new. We got to work it through. We got to be a university partner. We had a lot of things lined up, but we didn't do it, and it's all good,
Yeah, I mean, that's a great attitude to have about that. I mean, I can only imagine. Wishing you had that. It would have been a gamble, like you said, and sometimes they're just and sometimes they're just not. If it's not feeling good to you, but that's one of the things, that I took away is just, like family's got to come first, in all honesty. And that's what it came down to for me. And it actually, and it just it did help me gravitate to where I am now. It helped me take those initial steps. I still had to kind of hit, I don't want to say rock bottom, but I still had to go through some trials and tribulations to kind of, figure out who I am and what I want to be about. And now I feel like I've found it, and I'm just trying to blow it up like nothing else.
That's awesome. And the one thing I'll point out too for you and anybody listening in is, hey man, mom and pop, solopreneur, whatever, and franchise, any business is incredibly difficult. So, there's no difference between maybe a few more hours, but really that it doesn't matter. Like, it's like, whether you're trying to, be Elon Musk and put stuff on the moon, you're trying to run, the neighborhood grocery store, man, like people are going to steal from you. People are going to lie to you. People are going to, cook the books, and people are going to try to sue you, and people are going to, that's all the stuff that it's like, back to my pipeline friends and things I've been through. And, but it's like, man, like whether I was running a small business as a dealer, employing at the time, we had about 6 people running around. It was stressful. It was hard. It was just as hard as, building a software company that had never been built before. It was hard, very, very hard. So again, it's challenging, and I like challenging things as a person, but absolutely you can't, I've got to try to get into business with one guy, and he was so willing to not fail, even though he kind of like didn't realize itself. And here and I maybe going to merge this when I got home from deployment in 2017. And he was like, at one point, he was like living in his car. He like had been years unemployed trying to build a very similar business that I ended up building, that he had in his head. But I'm like, well, dude, like I have a real business over here with assets. You have a vision. I think your vision's great. But dude, like you're living in your car. Like, your wife is supporting you and your son, and you're like stealing Wi-Fi, at late at night, driving up to the coffee shop. It's just like, bro, go get a job, man. You got a family to feed. And I was like, hey, I'm either going to raise money or I'm going to go get a job, and I end up raising money so I can build a company. But I was like, I have no qualms with being like, hey, it didn't work. I couldn't raise some money. I couldn't get that vision going. So, and that eventually had to happen when I torched my company anyway. I had to go get a job, right? It's pretty simple, but it's like, man, don't hang on to a dream that's killing the rest of the things that actually matter, right?
Right, and that's one of the things that I had to kind of go through as well. It was kind of like once, and I basically had to come to the point where it's like, okay, even if put in 20 more hours a week, and I was already burning like 70, 80 hours a week. At the end of the day, am I like, is this going to work? Like, is this going to be it? And I just had to tell myself, no, it's not. And, and then the other side, you look at the other side, when you're working for yourself, it is extremely hard. And that's one of the things I've definitely taken away from it, is saying, now I apply that same entrepreneur, that same ownership to my now employer, because I know what I wanted from an employee. So I know how to be as an employee myself. And it was just kind of like, all of a sudden, you go from this burning the candle at both ends and having all this added stress and all of the things that come along with being your own owner. And then having to go, wait a second, I can go to work and only have to work 40 hours a week for it, and I'm actually going to get paid and have benefits. And I can just show up when I'm just supposed to. It was just like, and I have no stress for this. This is
when you leave, you leave.
Yeah, that was, it was kind of like, well, this is a cake, this is cake, and then, now I'm with other people that, still have that older mentality where, I'm working with somebody, they need to pay me more. I needed to have this time off. And I'm just like, you have no clue. Yeah, you have no clue. Yeah. And that's exactly it, so that's another rabbit trail I'm not going to go down, but it's just amazing to see that, first, I'm so proud of you, bro. I'm so proud. Just talking with you, just like hearing all this stuff, bro. You made it, man. You won, bro. Like, you seriously.
I don't know about that. I don't feel that way, but I appreciate it. Same back to you, man. Like I say, you're walking the path. You've done something I haven't done, and I don't know if I have aims to do it, but you just ran a marathon, man. That, like, every one of my friends that does that, it's incredible. Like, the most I'll lift and I'll go run like 4 or 5 miles. I'm like, that's enough. Like, I'm not a born runner. I know and then there's also the mentality, and there's the time, and there's something about the accomplishment. So hats off for sure, man. Like I said, I think one day I might run a half marathon, but I have no desire, man. The first guy that ran a marathon died. You know that. Yeah. He's dead. He's like, he runs from he's running from Athens to Marathon, and he dies after he delivers the message. Like, I got no interest in that, man. You guys have at it, dude. You run your 100 miles. So, like, no, it's fantastic. Like I said, it's the same thing, man. Like, it comes down to this: like, surround yourself with people who have similar goals, shared vision, and are smart and motivated. All those things, got it. And you are who you're around, and all these other adages. But it really is true. Like, you got to look at yourself. And that's what I learned in 2018, coming in 2019. Is like, for the most part, I was surrounded by these pipeline folks, everything else, but one piece of cancer comes in there and it can destroy your life, right? And so it's very careful. I'm just a little more careful with my time and everything else, right? I think, this is the lesson of getting older, but also doing some of these things that are, hard, right? And whatever the hard thing is, run a marathon, start a business, freaking excel your career, be a father, all these things are hard. And that's what I've tried to learn is like the balance, right? Like you dedicate time for yourself to go run. I dedicate time for myself to go to the gym and lift and play guitar or whatever it is, right? So it's just kind of a sign of maturity, and there are people that grow up, they don't get mature, right?
Yeah. And my biggest thing now is because I work with a lot of younger individuals who work in the hospital setting. And, I just try to pass on as much as I can to them, and just try to express to them, hey, like you were saying, man, this is hard. Like, it's going to get tougher for you. The more challenges that you try to take on, it's going to get hard. But if you can, just kind of persevere through that, if you can just apply your mental toughness to that, and the sense of accomplishments once you've gone through it, is amazing. It'll be worth it. It'll definitely be worth it, and you'll grow so much from it.
Yeah, and that's it, right? But I think there's that mental toughness, and you got to realize things are hard. You got to realize when things are toxic, and I think it's how do you know? Like, you had to go through that. You kind of look and say, hey, this thing I'm building, I don't even know what your small business was. What was your small business?
I had an eBay business, so kind of like the 40-year-old virgin. I was selling people stuff on awesome. eBay. So that was kind of, it was a good niche though, especially in this area.
Yeah, no, I mean, again, anything you're trying to do to make a buck, I always just say, hey, and the stats go like this, right? This is the kind of thing that a lot of people don't realize is 3% of, at least America, I don't know about the world, but 3% of America employs the other 97%, right? And so everyone's like, I think I just want to be a business owner and have a yacht. Like, okay, that's great and all, but there's a reason it's a 3% to 97% ratio, because once people get into it, all of it is hard, and it's all going to be challenging, and you have to have a certain personality, and you have to have some backing, and it goes on and on and on. And again, and you also have to go through it and realize, like, I was missing some key components. Like, I thought I had it all going, and it was on paper, but I didn't realize there was a dominance campaign being waged against me by just having these toxic people in my life that were just lying to me every day. So that's hard to go through that stuff, and you got to bounce back.
Yeah, I think I've heard it said that the people that the deepest wounds and the hardest the deepest wounds are usually inflicted by the people that are closest to you. Yeah. So the most pain that we'll ever go through. So I'm sorry that you had to go through that, but hey, hopefully you came out on the brighter side of things, and it sounds like you've definitely grown and learned and matured from it. So
that's what it's all about, right? So
tell me what you're doing. Tell me what are you doing now? Like, where are your hands sticking to now? Like,
so I missed flying. I was burnt out on flying because I was an instructor in the Navy. They just crank you all the time, and I was like getting degrees and had the young kids, and I was like 100 hours a week for years, whether it's 70 hours a week in flying and 20, 30 hours a week and getting degrees. It's like, let me take a break. Let me start a small business, because that should be easy, right? That was my idea of a break. So I missed it, man. And after I torched that company going into 2019. I kind of dabbled around here and there. I helped some folks with some digital marketing, and I got in the lab space, and that's kind of what gave me the idea later on. But got a job, just a day job that was pretty low stress, helping a infectious disease lab. So again, I had these weird skill sets growing in 2019. Had no idea pandemics coming around. So I did that, and I decided, like I don't just need to bounce around between jobs. I need to kind of get back into flying. The airlines were in a huge boom at the time, 2019, and everybody I talked to was like, "Oh, dude, be an airline pilot. You can grow a business on the side. You can do whatever you want." Seemed great. And so in 2019, I did all that. I had a business on the side called Blue Venture Advisors. I still have it, and we're still doing some cool stuff there. But basically, I was like, "All right, here it is." So I get hired on with a regional airline because I hadn't flown for about 6-7 years. And they're like, "Oh, come on in. We'll give you cash signing bonuses. We'll pay for all your training." It was like bizarro land, because when I got out of active duty in 2013, they're like, "Hey, you give us, money, and you bring all your credentials, and then we'll pay you like, beans," right? And I'm like, that's a terrible, arrangement. So at this point in 2019, the pilot shortage is so unique that even the regional airlines, for the first time ever, are giving cash signing bonuses. And my signing bonus equated all in between my training and cash, like $50,000. This is awesome. And, the pay isn't any good. But I was like, that's cool, because everybody kept telling me, hey, Glenn, with your military flying background, you'll be a Delta guy or United guy before you know it. Just get in, get back flying. And 6 months later, you'll be whatever you want to be. And so I go through training, and sure enough, there's professional consultants. They're like looking at our class, being like, raise your hand if you're military, raise your hand if you flew heavy planes, raise your hand if you have thousands of hours, raise your hand if you have these hours pilot in command. I'm like the only guy in the room out of 100 people with my hands to raise. She's like, you are like the top of the top. You're ready to go to be a Delta. You in 6 months max. So I'm like, all right, this is awesome. So this is bleeding into 2020, and we all know where this script is being written. So I'm like, this is great. Stability, you got a great career path. And then pandemic hits, and I'm like low man on the totem pole, and the furloughs are coming, and I'm like, oh goodness. So 2020 was semi-miserable, back to like, hey, this happened, like what's gonna happen. So thank God, the Navy for me is taken away a lot, but it's also given a lot. So I go online throughout 2020. I'm just looking for opportunities in the reserves, and I stumbled upon one that I'm like perfect for, given my special operations flying and multiple staff tours that I've done, working for generals and admirals, and special counterterrorism stuff I did in 2016. And so I see this thing down in Tampa, Florida, where I've lived before. It's actually my favorite city in Florida. And I look at my wife, I said, hey, babe, Special Operations Command, what's called SOCOM, for those who play video games, whatever. SOCOM has this crazy, unique job. I'm like perfect for it. I'm going to apply for it, because we got to get out of this airline purgatory of like not making any money. And they're trying to hold you on because, they don't want to give you unemployment benefits. They don't want to claim that they furloughed you. And there's federal money coming in and out. I'm like, oh, this is just miserable, just not knowing. So yeah, land this job. I'm like the absolute perfect fit, and sign up for 1-year orders voluntarily. And we move out of KC and head down to Tampa in December of last year. I've been here ever since, and now the airlines of all things, they're gone from furloughing everybody and doom and gloom. Now they're hiring again. So I'm working hard to just figure out how to get back into flying for the second time in less than 2 years. So luckily it's easy. I'm on military leave from my regional airline, so they have to take me back. They're begging to take me back already, because apparently pilots went from the most in demand to like, no, we don't need any pilots, nobody's flying, cut everybody. Now they're most in demand again. So it's like these cycles in business. It's just interesting how it all plays out. But I'm so now, instead of staying down here 2 years, which is kind of our plan, I'll probably 90% certain on this right now, probably wrap up with SOCOM. Really kick-ass job down here. I love it, but I got to get to the original plan back in 2019 and kind of get on that career path. The lifestyle, you're away from kids, and I get that. But with running a business on the side and that, I think we've already made the mental leap to do that, and I know what the lifestyle is back in 2019. So 2021, hopefully by the end of it, I'll be back flying again, and we'll be running my business on the side, and happy camper. But you never know what other wrenches are going to get thrown at you, right?
Yeah, man. It's that's so. Are you going to be moving back to KC, or are you guys going to stay in Tampa? You're going to move back?
Yeah, we'll go back to KC. That's where home is, man. We're here. We're big Chiefs fans, right? Go Mahomes, and we're season ticket holders there, and it's a great city. Tampa is the only other city we've ever even talked about. If we think years ago, we're like, hey, if we ever move away from KC, like where would we move? And we're like, what about Tampa? So we like it here, and I think I got some business. My side businesses in government contracting and some things like that. So there should be in the future business to be done here. I like the idea of maybe eventually getting a business apartment down here, if it makes sense for the business. But again, primary focus right now, get back to the airlines. Everybody, they forced all the early retirements out, and all of a sudden they're like, we don't have any pilots. Yeah, okay. So I'll take advantage of that as a career path. Again, flying's fun. Airlines are what they are, and like I said, I'm in a unique position to kind of like be that guy with my hand raised, like, yeah, I got all this P3 time and I got all this experience, and they love it. I mean, if you're a FedEx or a Delta, like, that's the number one type of person you want to get, right? So.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like you've got it sounds like you got it all figured out. No, but no, it sounds like you definitely, it sounds like you definitely have some great opportunities moving forward, man. And it's so great. I love Kansas City. I've been there. I spent a couple days there, a few years back. Had a great time. Just a really cool city, really good vibe.
Yeah.
I think
Oh,
it
man.
was actually there when the Royals actually won the World Series. Just
Oh, yeah,
prior
you're
to
there. You're
they
there. A
were
real
there.
good time then. Everybody's
Yeah.
pumped up. Yeah.
Oh, everybody was just going nutsy. That was it. I think they were in the playoffs at that point, or in October. So, and then of course I love Florida. I love Tampa. I've spent some time in Tampa as well. My wife and I, we always talk. Our end game is to get to Florida and live down there. So
Okay.
we're waiting to get. We're waiting. Are we looking
man.
at? Absolutely. We want to try to get something that's, somewhat affordable, but on the beach. So, we got some time to figure it out, but they'll like Cape Coral, Fort Myers area, but Tampa, that St. Pete's.
I was just down in Fort Myers for a business lunch or business evening the other day. It's 2 hours south of Tampa. And I am going on and off mute. Of course, the tree trimmers are coming in here. They want to trim the trees on a Friday morning. So anyway, I'm going on and off mute, man.
No, you're good. You're good. So that's our end game, is to get somewhere down there, and that way we can take a quick boat or quick flight down to Key West whenever we want. So that's all in the game plan. But hey, man, it's been an absolute pleasure and an absolute just great conversation. Just that your insight is, it sounds like we're on the same kind of trajectory, and in living different lives and living different realms, but the mentality and we're on the same paths as far as just mental game. And it's so great to see two kids that shared a fence on a Mogadishu type street now in Las Vegas have grown.
Baby.
Have grown to just especially you, man. I'm so proud. You're doing like your leaps and bounds above me but that's not what it's about. But
No, man, not at all. Like I said, I'm still learning. I'm struggling, right? In the sense of like, hey, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, and I thought I was 3 or 4 times over. But yeah, I'm 2 years away from being retired as a Navy commander. Like, can't complain. That's one thing I know that's like built in, and I'm proud of. And the rest of it is a very unknown. Who knows, man?
Absolutely. And but yet your accomplishments in for this country and with the Navy, being a naval commander, is speaks volumes, and just so great to see that, man. So it's been a pleasure to talk with you, bro. I wish the best for your family and your mom and dad and everybody. Hopefully we'll be able to sit down and chat again, hopefully in person sometime soon. But we'll go ahead and wrap it up. Again, I have Glen Dakan with me. He is a longtime friend of mine, and we grew up next to each other. And obviously, with his content that he's provided, he's just an amazing person, and sounds like he's got a lot of goals, a lot of ambitions, a lot of things to kind of give to the world, give to our country. And we wish nothing but the best for him. So thank you all for listening to Fill in the Blank podcast. I'm your host, Phil Austin. Of course, I have Glen Dakan here with me. Thank you so much for listening. Glen, any final words before we go?
I really appreciate the time, Phil. It's great to catch up. Amazing accomplishments yourself. Appreciate it. And as we roll into Memorial Day, let's remember those lost that fought for our country and died. This is not about people like me. It's about those folks that, some friends of mine as well. So let's remember that and enjoy that time with friends and family.
Amen. Amen. Thank you again for listening. Take care, everybody. Peace.